I have a rule, which is that if your movie has a dinosaur, a gorilla, a werewolf, or Frankenstein, I will watch that movie. And if they're all in the same movie,
wow,
then you got a good movie to me. But you know, I'm very easy to please. Like with movies with
You
like
must love Mad Monster Party. I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Dinosaur.
And I love like the 40s, you know, men in gorilla suit movies and stuff. I mean, no matter how bad those get, like the monster walks and the ape,
George Zuko movies.
yeah, Bela Lugosi meets a
Bela
Brooklyn.
Lugosi.
You know,
I remember
I live for that kind of
Channel
stuff.
4 in Indianapolis had a big thing where they were showing Gorilla at Large in 3D, and like you get the 3D glass from Convenience Food Mart, and like I thought the movie was boring and it gave me a headache. And we lived on the north side, so Channel 4 looked like crap anyway because Channel 4 was on the south side.
Even just as a tangent, one of the reasons I love the movie Conga, which is not a movie, but it is a kaiju movie, is because that is the perfect blend of like 50s goofy like sci-fi monster movie, and then it becomes a kaiju movie in the last like.
It's a British kaiju, you know. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Who knew what you were going to get?
Like Gorgo.
Yep,
Gorgo's
Gorgo,
not so great.
Gorgo is amazing.
But he's a great character.
Double Kiss, which you know sometimes gets some flack from people.
Well, Gorgo and Conga, and not everybody. Well, I figure everyone here at least knows this. You know, Steve Ditko rescued those characters when they got that license.
Yeah,
and really, I think his
Great
Gorgo and Conga stories were better than the movies, and very interesting visually. I really am a sucker for those.
He kind of writes the Conga comics like he wanted to write a King Kong comic. You know, he puts him in situations that you know King Kong would be in. He's fighting dinosaurs and you know in giant submarines and a lot of that kind of stuff. But yeah, he elevates that material. Maybe he elevates Conga. I like Gorgo a lot on its own.
Yeah, I do too.
But yeah, he definitely.
Conga looks like kind of whimsical. His expressions and almost cute, but then again, it's Ditko, so he still kind of looks a little weird, tweaky.
Yeah.
The thing I like, that's cool about Gorgo is that it's the third movie by this director who did The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and then he basically remade it as the Giant Behemoth, which is one of my favorite ones. It's got some problems. It's a low budget movie, but the animation, the stop motion animation, is marvelous. And it's got some darkness to it. This thing's radioactive, and they show people getting burned. And
I didn't know that was the same director. He did all three.
Yeah, it's Eugene Laurier, who is best known as a production designer.
Thank you, guys. See, I knew I would learn a lot today.
You learn something new every day, right?
And thank God they called it the Giant Behemoth, so that people knew what they were going to get, that it wasn't going to be one of those regular size behemoths or much smaller than expected behemoths. You know, this is a giant behemoth.
I think they were going to name it the Tiny Leviathan. The Tiny Leviathan.
I wish that they made like a 50s monster movie called like the Jumbo Shrimp or something.
Right.
That's a George Carlin joke.
Yes.
Which I just saw for the first time in 30 years.
There's a Brazilian parody of Jaws called Bacalhau. So.
So
I haven't seen it, but I know it exists.
You can admit if you've seen it. We're not going to judge you.
No, I haven't seen it. I would like to see it.
We're still your friends, Scott. No, I'm kidding. We know we are, but who wants between the two of you to talk next? Don't fight over it.
You can go, Tim.
I figured he would call on me anyway. So I picked two that I don't think are as strong thematically as what some of the other folks are talking about, but they've kind of become favorites of mine over the years. And to preface, neither of these movies I really saw as a super young kid. Like some of the Godzilla movies, I saw them like as a teenager later. The first one, anybody who knows me knows that I talk about this movie constantly, is War of the Gargantuas, which is from the mid-60s. It's kind of a loose sequel to Frankenstein Conquers the World, which is also a fantastic kaiju movie.
They make a brief reference to the severed hand, and that's about it.
Yes, yeah. You don't have to see Frankenstein Conquers the World to really understand what's going on in that movie, but it has so much going for it. It's not one of Ishiro Honda's strongest thematically, but just for sheer, monsters brawling and Akira Ifukube music and I mean it's aces. They just beat the crap out of each other in that entire movie. It's kind of unique because Toho at the time other than King Kong, really did not have a lot of like humanoid monsters. And here you have these two kind of like Sasquatch looking, Gaia and Sanda that duke it out the entire movie. And I just always thought it was interesting. Their fights are cool. They fight constantly in that movie. It's not one of those ones where there's like 45 minutes of humans talking and doing things, 10 minutes of monster action. It's pretty consistent throughout. One thing that bothers me about that movie, though, is I have kind of a weird phobia of octopus. I'm going to say that live on the air. And that movie opens with them fighting a real giant, like an octopus that they make look giant. And that always freaks me out. I can't really watch that part of the movie. But I love that movie regardless. I think it's just a lot of fun. I wish that it had a proper US Blu-ray. It does not. But yeah, I just adore that movie. And then
I have the Paramount EP VHS, so that's what I've got.
Yeah. And it was on HBO Max for a while. They had that amazing Criterion hub on their streaming service. And on there, Rodan was on there, like a couple of the ones Criterion has been sitting on but hasn't actually put out yet. And then War of the Gargantuas was always in this weird like continuity. Like it follows Frankenstein Conquers the World, and then it gets referenced as having happened in Godzilla Tokyo SOS from 2003. Like that was one of the canon, because those 2000 Godzilla movies, they kind of had their own continuity. Some of them followed certain movies, some of them only followed the first movie. They're kind of all over the place with that. But yeah, I always thought that was just a fun time. And then the second movie that I picked was King Kong Escapes, which I think Bill had mentioned a little bit earlier.
I have a bootleg of King Kong Escapes.
Yeah, I have the Blu-ray, which is the Universal one that has the really, really terrible dubbing. I think that's probably one of the worst dubbed Japanese monster movies, because the voice that they picked for the heroine that Linda Miller plays, that's not Linda Miller's voice. She has like this, she sounds like one of the Chipmunkettes or whatever they're called from
Chipettes.
Chipettes from
I just wanted to add on War of the Gargantuas that Haruo Nakajima played Gaira, and he thought that was his favorite role because he got to act with his eyes in it. Because it looks like those are his actual hands and feet, and it's like he's doing martial arts and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to add something about War of the Gargantuas, just silly, but I can't remember if it was you, Tim, or if it was me. But one of us posted a poster of it on the Deep Images group recently. I think it was me. Was it you?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. One or both.
I don't remember. I definitely saw it.
Yeah, and what's funny is, about a week later, it's got like 30 likes, and I was like, I didn't know this was going to be an unexpected group favorite. But
that's a monster movie that I think when you watch it, you can't help but fall in love with it. Just everything works. The action is awesome. I really can't say enough about that movie.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Except the Criterion needs to stop their ass and put the Blu-ray out. So
because one of the things with the dub version is there's this very cool march that they took out of it that I've seen it in Godzilla Fantasia. They replaced it with this really boring droning stock music as the Japanese military is going after Gaira. And the original music was and like, why would you take that out and put boring music in? I don't understand.
The American King Kong vs. Godzilla has all that cue music from Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is such a weird when that happens. When Godzilla shows up, they play the Creature from the Black Lagoon music. Very weird. So back to my second choice, King Kong Escapes. That I just think that movie encapsulates everything about 60s pop culture. It's not just a Japanese thing. It's so psychedelic and there's all these, it's part spy movie. It has some like James Bond, kind of stuff in it. And it's also unique because Rankin Bass, who did, all those Christmas specials and Mad Monster Party, produced that and did it in conjunction with an animated series, and which is kind of a weird combination, but they've done a couple of monster movies in their time. They did The Last Dinosaur. I don't know if you guys remember that one.
And Bermuda Depths.
Bermuda Depths with the. I think that's a giant turtle, right?
Yeah.
I like Rankin Pass.
Yeah, yeah. It was just, I think it was kind of, at that time, that wasn't really the type of stuff that they were doing, and they were getting into some other markets, and they produced that movie. There's also the mad scientist named Doctor Who, which
who's the name of the actress who plays the villain?
No, it's not Linda Miller.
She's very iconic right now.
Yeah, I don't know what her name is. Linda Miller is the like the damsel in distress heroine, and she could speak English, but they dubbed her voice for some reason, and it's very poor.
But didn't the woman who played that
Hama, who was also in and You Only Live Twice in King Kong versus Godzilla in a different role?
Yeah, that's what. Right. She's
Madame Piranha. She's awesome.
Madame Piranha. Well, for me, really the reason I picked King Kong Escapes is the two best parts of the movie, which is Gorosaurus and Meki Kong. Those two.
I have the action figure of Gorosaurus. I love that character. Is just a great design.
Yeah,
Gorosaurus is awesome. I kind of get mad when he dies in that movie. Even though he comes back
and he comes back. He is
Destroy All Monsters,
and he's in Godzilla's Revenge. But his death scene is kind of harrowing because he's like foaming at the mouth when he dies.
Yeah, but Meki Kong is one of the coolest designs I think of any kind of monster. I kind of like him more than Mechagodzilla. I know that might be sad.
I know. No, listen, I agree. If I could have any one costume to wear to Dragon Con and pass out in the heat, it would be Mecha Kong. I think it's just a great design.
Yeah, something
what a way
about
to go.
And that's such a. I mean, he predated Mechagodzilla by almost a decade.
Yeah. He's actually called Mechani Kong in Japanese.
Yeah, well, whatever. I call him Meki Kong, whatever. You know, I'm on a first name basis with him, just so you know, he lets me call him Meki Kong. But no, that's such a comic booky kind of concept too. It's like an evil doppelganger of King Kong, and it just everything about that's fantastic.
That's like around the same time when Iron Man fought the mechanical version of Thor Hulk that Mandarin made.
Yeah. And it's also like the suit. I mean, Toho never really got the King Kong suit right every time that they tried it. But it's a little
especially
bit
the face.
Yeah, it's a little bit better. It's a little bit better in King Kong Escapes, but not by much. And I also think they reused that suit in Ultra Q. I'm fairly certain there's a giant ape episode of that they reused. That's not technically Toho, but they did reuse it. But yeah, King Kong Escapes is just an awesome movie. I think that it kind of merges. I mean, like in the sense that American stuff in it really works, Japanese stuff in it really works. I think part of that's because King Kong is a Western character first. But yeah, I've always loved that movie. It's definitely an acquired taste. I think if you're someone that's never seen a kaiju movie and you're like, okay, we're gonna watch King Kong Escapes, they might be like, what in the heck is this?
But if you've seen a King Kong, I mean, if you've seen, if you have it, regardless of Godzilla, like if you've seen King Kong and you want more King Kong material, which is how I was as a kid, when they finally showed that after showing King Kong, Son of Kong, all the Planet of the Apes movies, Mighty Joe Young, then all of a sudden the local, late night syndicated channel on Friday nights was like King Kong Escapes, and the ads are just the movie has a lot of energy and it's just so raucous the way they cut the trailer, and I was like, oh great. Then when I saw him, I was like, yeah, he doesn't look like Kong, but it's still King Kong. It's like it's like a different artist took over Daredevil. It's not it's still Daredevil. But I thought it was, and then I didn't see it for many years until more recently, and I think it's a lot better than King Kong versus Godzilla, and a lot more entertaining. And I do think his face looks slightly better. Kong's. Yeah, I think it's
the Japanese version of King Kong versus Godzilla is significantly better than the American.
It is, yeah.
Just because the commentary is there, whereas in the American version, it's kind of like the producers felt like, yeah, this is kind of a stupid movie. We'll make it even stupider for Americans. I wouldn't say the Japanese one takes it seriously, but it has the satire really works in that movie. And I think there's a little bit of satire in King Kong Escapes, but kind of like It's kind of like if they threw.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Taco was played by Ichiro Arichima, who was considered the Japanese chaplain. So
yes, yeah, and they. But I think like King Kong Escapes is almost like if they took King Kong and they threw him into a a Roger Moore James Bond movie or something, which is part of the reason it's so much fun.
Oh
and
yeah,
just Gargantuas, I really can't speak enough of how much I love that movie.
And in the 70s, when I grew up, the idea of any kind of crossover, arguably, I'm still like this, but especially back then, if like say Marvel did a James Bond meets Godzilla comic, man, I'd buy that thing in a heartbeat. It'd be like,
well, they did do the Godzilla comic where you had Nick Fury in most of the issues. And Fantastic Four was in an issue, and the Avengers were in an issue.
Tons of Marvel.
I've always read that Toho tried to do a Godzilla versus Batman movie that just never ended. I don't know how exactly that would work, but it never ended up. They never ended up doing it. But that was something they were like obsessed with doing in like the late '60s into the '70s.
So it would have been the Adam West version of Batman versus Godzilla.
Maybe they never really specified if they were planning to have like a Japanese actor play Batman, if they wanted Adam West to do it, because I don't think it ever really got to the stage of even scripting it. I just think they had this idea. They wanted to do it for years and years because I feel like they did King Kong versus Godzilla, huge hit.
Right.
Yeah, they did like Destroy All Monsters, and they had some of their others like Rodan and stuff, show up in those movies. But after King Kong versus Godzilla, they never really did like a crossover with like Godzilla and another type of character until years and years later.
Until Godzilla meets Bambi. That was the next one.
Yeah, well, Toho didn't do that one. So.
Yeah, but it's become a real short film in its own right, satirical or otherwise. I consider Godzilla.
I thought it'd been cool if they had Godzilla meeting the human vapor, because the human vapor can become a vapor. You could like get in and choke him or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they just never.
And Yoshio Tsuchiya was this great actor, and like his only real. Well, he's been in a number of the Godzilla movies, but then he actually faced Godzilla in King Kong in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. And unfortunately, Godzilla just blows him away.
Yeah. Well, then there's also
they just look at each other, and Godzilla launches his fire for no apparent reason.
There is the.
He had a reason. You better believe it.
Oh yeah.
I think his name is Jiris. It's basically a Godzilla costume. They put like a fin around him. It almost looks like a cone you put on a dog when they come from the vet. And he fights Ultraman. So that's kind of the unofficial crossover.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
they used a couple Godzilla suits in Ultraman. So.
But before we let you go wild, Scott, I'm entertained because you're one of the few people I know. Well, maybe all of y'all are. That actually pronounces all these Japanese actors and directors' names pretty correctly. But plus, you seem to know more of them than I do as far as these kind of movies. But I wanted to show you all some collector porn. This was given to me, not a collection of porn, Bill.
Okay. This is a family.
No, this is what some of us call collector porn, and this was the first thing that Tim gave me as a boon to the channel, a gifting to the channel, Henry Covert channel, when I was doing Blue Review. First of many, and I don't know what possessed him, but I'm so happy. And since then, he's really been a major collaborator and sponsor of the channel. So he gave me the Criterion Showa era complete Godzilla Blu-ray set.
Nice.
I would love to have that, because a lot of these I've only seen in their English versions and read about the Japanese version.
That should be in every library in America.
It should. It's like Thriller. It should be in every household.
Yes.
But you look at this, man, all these essays, all these different artists of varying quality, though most great. And, all the, full cast, full credits, everything, all the Now this is one.
Yeah, because I haven't watched most of these since I was a teenager. So
there were some I had never seen, teenager or child or otherwise, I'd never seen the Japanese King Kong versus Godzilla, like we were talking about.
I've never actually seen it. I've just read about it.
And then I've
seen the American version.
Is this the fold out here? Oh yeah. So here's all the discs. And you got to be careful getting them out.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can see that.
At least I am, just because I'm anal retentive as hell. Because I scratched so many CDs back in the day that.
Yeah,
but yeah, this is all of the Showa era, and yeah, it's got both versions of King Kong versus Godzilla, both versions of King Kong Escape. No, it doesn't have that one. Does it?
Doesn't have that.
No,
it only has the Godzilla.
Both versions
films,
of King Kong versus Godzilla, both versions of Gojira.
Yes.
But it does have alternate versions of some other ones too.
It doesn't have of all of them. I think it was like a rights thing. Like I think some of the dubbed versions are held under different studios that just
they have the international versions, because what happened is that Toho would make dub tracks and the distributor didn't necessarily like them and did their own version. And that's what they don't have.
Yeah.
Well, what they do, I will say this conclusively, they do have the prime Japanese versions of all of them. And then they have extra ones. Yeah, international versions, the ones I mentioned. But yeah, that is incredible.
That camera set that Arrow Video did.
I need to get that bad, but I'm going to watch them on the Arrow channel.
Which is with my Blu-rays. I'm not taking it out right now, but
okay.
But that has some of the alternate cuts too, some of the AIP cuts of some of those movies, like Destroy All Planets, and War of the Monsters, and some of the stuff like that. I'll be honest with you. The older that I get, the less inclined to watch the American versions of those I am.
Oh, I'm not that inclined.
Yeah, it's kind of the point.
It's just curiosity, but that's about it.
Yeah, I've already seen them that way, and I know they're inferior just based on what I've read. So, and then sometimes you watch, because like one of the ones I did watch with subtitles was Godzilla versus HEDORAH, and that wasn't that much different. So
yeah.
That's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
It is
psychedelic Godzilla.
That was actually the first one I taped off TV and watched. And for a while, I went through a period where I didn't really like the psychedelic elements, and that's like some of the best stuff.
It is.
And that guy, that was an eccentric guy. It was made by Yoshimitsu Banno, who made only one other film for them.
Yeah.
And he unfortunately passed away. He was under a 3-picture contract, and he ended up mostly getting involved in animation. He ended up he was the screenwriter on the anime Wizard of Oz from 1982. So, and he did another one I've got called, which isn't that good, called Technopolice 21C, another anime. He ended up moving over to the animation department, and he never wanted to fulfill that contract because he was more interested in doing other stuff.
HEDORAH is kind of the one that I recommend to people that are new to Godzilla, that have never seen Godzilla movie at all. I say, watch this one, see how you feel about it, and then go from there.
Right.
And of course, if they don't like that movie, I'm no longer friends with them. But that's all.
I block them immediately.
Yes.
So Scott, while you got the floor, what did you want to talk about? What films?
Well, I'm not necessarily going to talk about favorite ones, but I'm going to talk about things I've seen recently. And it's interesting because you talk. I'm going to talk about this one, which I just saw last night. This is called The X from Outer Space.
Oh, wow.
It's a strange one, because I was surprised at I heard how awful it was, basically just because the suit design is so silly. But it's a really interesting film. I mean, the monster doesn't appear until 47 minutes in. It's a space thriller for the first more than half the film. I had just seen Queen of Blood recently. It was like the last of the major Curtis Harrington films I hadn't seen, and I finally got a copy. And it reminded me a lot of that at the beginning. And there's a whole love triangle thing, and like there's this doctor who gets really sick, and he's played by Eiji Okada of Hiroshima Mon Amour fame, and they're 3 white actors. One of them is actually German. I watched the it has both versions. I actually don't think it's both versions, but my VHS is buried, so I haven't been able to compare it, because it does have the dub track on it, but somehow I don't think the one that Orion released had the Japanese titles all over it. And I don't know if the songs or anything are the same. But anyway,
it has songs.
It has a song at the beginning and a song at the end.
Oh, okay. Not a musical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's actually singing in it. And it's got one character who's like really goofy, and like at one point they're showing him eating dinner, and this is very 60s looking dining room, and he's like, so he looks like, I mean, he reminded me of Ron Weasley with like the chicken legs.
Speaking of,
it was a really interesting film. I thought it was really taut as a thriller. I thought the goofiness of the monster kind of makes people think it's a stupid movie, and like, Yeah, the monster does look stupid. I mean, like even the guy who's Chuck Stevens, who writes the notes for that film, doesn't think very highly of it. But he like talks about how the guy's like a faucet for a head and all that.
Wait, did you say Chuck Stevens didn't like it?
Well, he does. I wouldn't say he doesn't like it, but it sounds like he doesn't think it's a very good film.
Oh well, okay. I'm just scratching him off my critics list then. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it sounds like he doesn't think it's.
I wanted to say something. Speaking of like space thrillers that turn into monster movies, one of my favorites in that exact same vein, although the monster looks a little better, is Gorath, which I assume you guys have seen before. That's the one with the giant.
That was one I had trouble getting a copy of for the longest time.
I've seen it, but I don't remember.
It's been on my VHS wish list forever, and I know the walrus monster got cut from the American version.
American one, yeah.
What? Not the walrus monster.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think
it was a monster called Magma.
Or Maguma.
Maguma in Japanese.
Maguma.
Yeah.
They took him right out of that movie.
He got cut. I tried to rent it one time, and I was annoyed because I put it in, and it was in black and white, and I knew it wasn't made in black and white, and it pissed me off, and I took it back and complained.
That was one time.
And that's like the only time I ever found a VHS copy of it.
If you go on YouTube, you can see all the walrus scenes. There's only about 2 minutes worth, but
I know it's very brief
in that movie, but I even think the space stuff in that movie is pretty interesting too. There's a lot of space battles that I feel like they stole right in Star Wars, and put it, especially like the Death Star trench stuff. But yeah, it just is in the same vein. It's like monsters in it for 2 minutes, and the rest of it is, goofy sci-fi stuff that doesn't quite work, but it's still a lot of fun. That was back in the day when you didn't have to be super scientifically accurate. You could just kind of go hog wild and make these fun, entertaining sci-fi movies.
That's kind of like with Battle in Outer Space, which like with War of the Gargantuas, they took out the good music and put in boring music. And a lot of what's Star Wars really ripped a lot off Battle in Outer Space. They include the alien helmets are very similar to the biker scouts in Return of the Jedi. So
no, you're right.
So you enjoyed X.
I really like the X from Outer Space. It's like this space thriller where it's like these they're like these little growths on the back of the ship that actually get launched at them by alien UFO. And
I hate when that happens.
But which never really gets explained, other than that we know it's from Mars. There's no real, because the whole premise
of the film is
from Mars. They're trying to land on Mars, and they haven't been successful because their ships keep getting destroyed. So that's basically the premise.
All that taxpayer money down the drain.
Yeah, and then it's got because the white woman. I don't.
Hey now,
her name. They call her Dr. Lisa. She's played by Peggy Neal. She has a last name, but I don't remember them actually saying it in the script.
All white people calling
her Dr. Lisa.
Yeah.
And of course they're all dubbed. I watched the Japanese version, and the three white actors are all dubbed.
That's karma. Dub the white woman with Japanese.
They're all dubbed. And she kind of sees it's a very awkward metaphor. It actually I did look at the ending of the dub to see how they handled the song, which they didn't do anything to. But also because I got to see that the lip movements matched with the English dialogue with the white actors. I say white because one of the actors was German. His name was Franz Gruber.
That's as white as they get. Yeah.
They're white.
Yeah. Well, I always laughed like when I would watch the dubbed version.
I'm white. I'm German.
Yeah. When I would watch the dubbed versions of Godzilla movies as a kid, and you would go the whole movie where they're speaking English and yada yada yada, and then as soon as there was like a song, like Mothra's song, King Caesar's song, it would just be entirely in Japanese. And I'm like,
Mothra's a little different because that song's actually in like Indonesian, I think.
Yeah, but even like the King Caesar song in Godzilla.
But
which
Tim, there's an in-plot. There's an in-plot reason for that. Those were alien lyrics. Yeah. They were aliens speaking an alien language, not Japanese. Not Japanese. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, where was I? I totally forgot where I left off.
You were coming to the to your apotheosis about X from outer space.
Yeah,
not the right word.
it is kind of, I mean, the theme is kind of awkward, and it's like how this woman wanted this other woman, this woman wanted this man who already had another woman and knew that he was never going to love her the way that she loved, that he loved his wife or his girlfriend or whatever, and that conflict was big in the film. And like, and then like there was a character called Dr. Stein who he didn't want to go on the mission at all. He was a moon-based doctor, and he had to go on the mission because the guy A.G. Okada played got sick and had to stay at the moon base. So he was getting pissed off all the time because he had to be in this space mission that he didn't want to be on. So that made an interesting part, but in a lot of ways, like, the human characters were more interesting, and it was kind of over the map, and it was a little bit sexist. I mean, Ishiro Honda was actually pretty progressive when it came to women in the Godzilla films. He always tried to put a woman in a strong role, and part of that was because it was aiming at kids, and he really wanted women to have a better place in society, because like Japan was like famous, like the woman was like supposed to walk behind the man, and like it's like like women are just really just not seen as equal to men in Japanese culture. And Honda didn't like that. He was actually seen as someone, when he was first got started, they said, oh, this is going to be a guy who's going to make women's pictures, which my professor, Dr. Bingham, would always say you shouldn't call them women's pictures, you should call them women-centered melodramas, and he preferred that term.
Hey, it did okay for Mizoguchi and Ozu, so wouldn't have been that bad.
And I think Ishiro Honda keeps a lot of that melodrama in his Godzilla movies. Most of the human drama, or like the love story stuff that happens in that, like that. The story in Terror of Mechagodzilla is a great example of that. That very strange, like, sci-fi melodrama that just so happens to have monsters in it, and the girl like psychically controls Titanosaurus, all this other kind of stuff.
There's always a strong career-oriented female in an Ishiro Honda Godzilla film, and she's never criticized. It's always something to be aspired to, something good, something the male characters judge her on, are criticized for. It's always it's a very feminist streak in all of these Ishiro Honda Godzilla
you have the most powerful feminine figure in Godzilla movies, which is of course Mothra, who is the most powerful female character in any of the Godzilla movies, Mothra. Although I think
which is interesting because in a lot of the dub versions, it's never clear what her gender is.
Yeah.
She laid an egg.
So, what was your second movie?
I'm gonna speak into a little bit. I haven't seen it recently, but I'm gonna, because the other one I've seen recently is Varan, and I was kind of disappointed with it because the American cut is boring, but the Japanese cut is not quite as boring, but it's still kind of boring, even though they changed it a lot. But I'm going to talk about one of the most maligned of the original Godzilla films, and it's now known as All Monsters Attack, and I saw it under the Saperstein title, Godzilla's Revenge. And that was another one where it focused heavily on the human characters, and that may be one of the I think the main reason people don't like it is because it has a lot of stock footage from previous films.
It's a fun movie, I think.
It is a fun movie, and I think it's a really interesting film because it's talking about this kid whose parents work constantly, and they're not. Got the Godzilla versus Mothra of 1992. That they get into a big fight with a guy because he's a salaryman. These are like working class people. The one guy like drives a train. It's not even like a passenger train. It's like some train that like moves stuff around a yard or something. I'm not really even clear what he does.
Like the way that Honda incorporated the stock footage in that movie maybe wasn't intentional at first, but he kind of did this thing. That whole movie is told through a kid's point of view, and it was almost like this kid this isn't what happens in the movie, but it's almost like the kind of thing where it's like this kid has seen all these Godzilla movies, and they're kind of like Godzilla is seen in such a superhero light in that movie that thematically the stock footage makes sense because a lot of the kids would have seen bits and pieces of those monster fights from that movie, and kind of integrating it like that, I actually think sort of works for that.
Yeah, I think it does too.
Because it has this
it is kind of ambiguous whether it's actually in Godzilla continuity, whether Godzilla is real or not, or if it's just a movie character, because that's never made clear. But but it's interesting because because like his neighbor is this toy maker, who's played by Ace Yamamoto, who's this great character actor. He's got this big long beard. He if you've seen that Woody Allen movie, he's the one with the cobra, and he's who killed my cobra, and like it's that guy, and he's a really interesting actor, and again, it's one where a lot of the human stuff is more interesting, and I think that's one of the reasons some people don't really like it, and I find that really appealing because it is a commentary on the society of the time, and I love the Ikio Sawamura as the bartender. Of course, like I'm only talking about the dub version here because that's the version that I have, and it's like, how much is 50 million yen? It's enough money to fill a bag about this size. He's like, and that guy's a hoot. He's also the guy. He's also the farmer in Destroy All Monsters who finds the Keelak object on his land. He's a great little character actor. But it's interesting because I was reading about that film, and like in the cut version, at the end of the film, it's not quite at the end of the film, but there's an abbreviated version where this is the end of the film, and that's where the mother promises Ichiro that she's not going to work as much, and you can tell by the look on her face that she's humoring him, and that can't actually be the case because she does have to keep working, and it's this kid who spends all his time at home, and basically he decides he's gonna. It's kind of like more because he ends up getting into this big fight with this bully called Gabra, which is also the name of the original monster in the film, this sort of reptilian cat with this sort of cat face to him, and who I actually thought was one of the like creepiest looking monsters in the entire series.
Yeah, it looks kind of strange.
Yeah, but it's like he's like educating himself based on watching TV. I love his dub reaction when he puts on the soap opera and he's yeah. but he's like educating himself based on the TV, and so he's decided that because Godzilla is training Minya to be a fighter, that he has to be a fighter too, and that has a real moral dimension to it that that is kind of awkward and something that may not be the best lesson that he should be learning.
How many monster kids in the 70s, would come home and their parents would be working and they would, put on TV and watch some kind of a monster movie. Godzilla's Revenge is very much talking about that kind of thing. I don't know if they
it is
doing that, but I think all these years later, especially the Japanese version, it's pretty poignant considering the type of reputation.
Yeah. And people have actually tried to find that child actor Tomonori Yazaki to interview him, and they haven't been able to find him.
Oh, interesting.
Wow. So do you think it's kind of almost a meta? It sounds kind of like a meta film.
It is kind of a meta film,
but also a commentary.
Like I said, you don't know if
don't
know if Godzilla actually exists in that continuity. The reporters. There's a point where the toy maker comes out. His name is Minami. He comes out and he's like talking about, oh, Minya taught the little boy Ichiro says, oh, Minya taught me this stuff, and like they don't know who Minya is, but they know who Godzilla is, and like, is it in the normal reality? Is it in Godzilla's reality? We don't really know, and I think that's an interesting aspect. That the fact that they didn't leave that unanswered actually makes the film more interesting.
Yeah,
I assumed personally that it was, but then no one believes the kid.
Yeah,
but there are points where you could maybe say maybe not.
Yeah, and Minya talks in this one because they actually have conversations.
Well, that's what makes it weird too. Yeah,
it does make it weird, and Minya talks like this, and he's like, which is not how he talks in the Japanese version. I know he's dubbed with. I know his voice is actually a woman.
There's also
the
weird
version.
Conversation that Godzilla and Anguirus have in Godzilla versus Gigan.
Which interestingly, that was about a comic book artist, and the Japanese version actually did that in word balloons.
Yes,
and that makes it really interesting. It was just like it's gonna take too much effort to redo the word balloons in English, so we're just gonna dub it.
Whatever. But no, Godzilla's Revenge was actually the first Godzilla movie I ever watched. And,
oh wow!
And I remember it vividly. And I mean, a lot of people, I mean, I was like 6 years old. I'm sure a lot of people be like, you can really remember that? But no, I could, because I remember seeing Gabara, you know, on the screen. And when I saw Godzilla, all I saw was, okay.
I remember seeing Lady and the Tramp in the theater when it was reissued in like 1981.
Oh,
and
okay.
that would mean I was like 6.
I saw Lady and the Tramp in the theater re-release when I was about 6 too, but it was a few years before you saw it.
And I saw
Dumbo.
The part I most vividly remembered was the part where Lady got put in the muzzle.
No, sad.
Luckily, they've never muzzled Godzilla.